Hello, welcome to Truth Not Tradition Online Bible Study for February 10th, 2016. I'm Tony Samario, joined by my father, Brother Sal, in California. He'll be putting this up on his website, BroSal.org, and BroSal on YouTube, and also the Philadelphian Church on YouTube, though I notice we don't get anybody over at the Philadelphian Church, but who knows, someday. As we're going through the book of Revelation, Dad, I've been reading this week and just reflecting on this incredible future that's coming. I just read something today in there which sounded different to me than I've ever read it before, but at one point, we may not get to it today, but in the next week or two, John's gonna remind him, excuse me, of the prophecy that says, "Behold, I come like a thief." This is all just gonna come like a thief, all this stuff. The earth's been just like in the days of Noah. I mean, isn't that what it says? Everybody eating and drinking and giving each other in marriage and having kids and, doing our normal thing, and the end comes, this like a thief. It's worth the study because, just before that he says watch, or just after that in that thought, he says watch and don't lose your garments so you won't have to walk around naked. And I had read before that that's a reference to the Roman law, that if a guard fell asleep on duty, they took his clothes. So he had to walk home naked. So that's what John's saying in that sense, just like a Roman soldier whose job it is not to fall asleep, no matter what the distractions, no matter how tired he is from guarding. John's warning us, keep watching so that you won't have to walk around naked when it happens and you were sleeping. So that's why we're studying, and not that we fear anything. What do we have to fear? Everything about Christianity seems to be given it unto death. We just read that, didn't we, last week? So, death shouldn't be so scary. To me, it's more this, what am I supposed to know? What am I supposed to be watching for? What was John thinking when he saw this and was writing about these beasts and this time frame and, what he was seeing? What am I supposed to know? This was written for the servants of God. Even if I'm just an observer on the sideline and can't qualify as an actual servant of God, I still have this longing to know, what do the servants of God, what are they supposed to know at this time? And so we left off last week in chapter 13, and I would just want to start because in looking it over again, Dad, this week I found that in chapter 12, at verse 6, the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God that they should feed her for 3.5 years. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but did not prevail. Neither was their place found any longer in heaven. Thus the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast out on the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the deliverance and the power and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have been accomplished. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before God day and night, is cast down, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not despair themselves even to death." Um, and now telling them, therefore you on the earth, woe to you. They're coming down to you now. So anyway, traditionally, Dad, we've always seen this as this midpoint of the tribulation period, when the devil's cast down and enters into this person in the world that has assumed this high place in the world and this potential for honor and power and rulership. And now they're entered by this devil that's been cast down, and they turn on the Jews and destroy them. And that, I can't say that that's not what this is symbolizing or prophesying. I just, as I was talking about last week, you have to have some sort of context to understand now the deliverance and the power and the kingdom of our God and the power of Christ have been accomplished. Well, that's not at the midpoint of 3.5 years, is it? I mean, how is that? War in heaven. Well, wasn't there war in heaven in the beginning? That's what got me thinking. Is this again like the picture of the whole thing going all the way back from the beginning? War in heaven and going all the way forward to the final conflict. But no, I don't think so, Dad. I think this war in heaven, this is the part. What war in heaven are we talking about? And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but did not prevail. Neither was their place found any longer in heaven. Well, did we wait? Did God have to wait tens of thousands of years or whatever it's been before Michael and his angels could throw the devil out? I mean, is this like, you know what I mean? What fight results in Michael and his angels being able to throw the dragon and his angels out? And I think some of this is making a little sense to me, and that's why I wanted to start here now, because last week it didn't make much sense to me, and this week it seems to I have a little better feel for it, at least in my own mind, and that is, I think I mentioned it last week, we must be talking about the Jews here, Dad, and this house of Israel, this woman clothed with the sun. I mean, that's what, this whole story revolves around God's manifesting through this house of Israel, and this house of Israel not being what God asked them to be, not being obedient, and therefore God having to follow through with sending all these prophets to tell him, get right with me, or I'll have to do this. And it's always, get right or I have to destroy you, let other kingdoms come in and take your stuff and kill you. But eventually, I will have my way. Eventually, you will carry that scepter and rule the nations and, all these things. So, we know that sometimes I read this, Dad, and I wonder, there's references even in this Bible that, I read this one from the ancient Eastern text, this Aramaic translation of the Peshitta, which is the third Bible. I started with a King James version and then the Ryrie Study Bible. So, as I say, I don't find anything so different, but I do find a few things. I like the way it reads. It seems to be a little clearer. So I believe that the translation may be just a little bit more precise to the type of words that were spoken in Aramaic at the time. But other than that, there's nothing else different about my Bible except that I don't have all those Ryrie notes in here anymore. But even this Bible makes some mention about the number 666 represents the Aramaic letters which spell Nero, Caesar. Wow, okay, so 666 was meant to warn us of Nero 2,000 years ago, which means all this stuff is done. How do you fit that? but wait a minute, what about new heaven and new earth? No sin, no death. Well, we're still dying. So however else you want to, you know, try and understand all of this as having already taken place back in the first century. I mean, I don't see how, 1,000-year millennium, when did that happen? Devil let out again for a little season. Okay, even if I can imagine all that is symbolical. So the first 1,000 years was after Christ died, and the apostles and the disciples led this world to know Jesus, but then the devil was let out, and that's gone downhill. Now, I don't know. But Revelation definitely talks about raising even Hades, all the sea giving up its dead, white throne judgment, tabernacle coming down out of heaven, dwelling among men. Never again will they die. No more sin. Devil locked away. Lake of fire. I don't know. I haven't seen any of that. I don't know how you reconcile all of it as being in the past. The prophets, practically to a man, mentioned this reconciliation of Israel, a time when they will be the bride, and they'll fulfill their bridely promise. And so, I don't think that we can, for me, I can't, as much as I'd like to be able to open my mind and think, geez, maybe I'm reading all this wrong. Maybe we're seeing this stuff wrong. Excuse me, Dad. But just as a slight parenthesis for those that might be wondering the same thing. I don't know. Daniel's 70 weeks of years, lay it out pretty good, which means that would have had to happen 7 years after the Messiah was cut off. The prince that came destroyed the city, right? And that all happened. Not within 7 years, within 70 years or so, or 30 years in 70 AD. So they sealed up. I mean, how can you reconcile everything as taking place? You really can't, I don't think. I mean, not and take the whole scripture seriously. You have to then, I mean, to me, you might as well throw the whole thing out then. It's really just convoluted and confused. And if it's all really taken place, then Jesus, it doesn't give that impression. Daniel's 70th week, 70 weeks of years seem to relate a final 7-year period that's going to take place, in which all of the things outlined in Daniel, the sealing up and anointing, and which jibe with all the other prophetic pictures of this reconciliation at the end. So I think Revelation and these ideas of things that may or may not have already taken place in the first century still have to be kept on the table, because if everything took place then the scripture really is untenable, incomprehensible, as far as I'm concerned. If some of these events weren't projected into the future, if we are not in some sort of, Daniel's glasses, as Dad used to call it for so many years, vision, where we're seeing this future that Daniel was predicting to come, when the people of a new prince will come, and the city and sanctuary will be destroyed. Well, they don't even have a sanctuary anymore. So that either already happened 2,000 years ago, or it is in the future. And well, we happen to live at a time when, there's this whole group over there with a website and everything. The temple, what's it called, Dad? Darn it, I can't keep all the facts all the time in my mind. But the tabernacle people over there in Jerusalem, they're ready to rebuild the temple in the manner of King David, prefab temple. Put that thing up. They got the red heifer. They got the priestly garments. They've got the priest trained. They know exactly how they're going to do it. Start up worship again. Get the sacrifice going. Get back on track. Excuse me. And I think you've got to see all that as a tremendous, an integral part of this whole end time picture is what's going on with the temple and the ideas that are being, that are used to move forward in this time. The state of Israel, right? I mean, look at, it's either God bringing his people back to the land, or the synagogue of Satan, Ashkenazi Jews, false Messiah play, which is where I'm starting to see, Dad. That's why, I see that now. What has the spirit of Antichrist been doing for all these years in the world? Okay, and that's the reason I'm spending a minute here. I know where I'm at, is that this idea that that there was war in heaven, the dragon cast down, no more place for him to accuse. Why'd that take all this time if this is going on in the midpoint of the 3.5 years? What has happened that's caused a war in heaven? See, and so now to me, I'll just go ahead and throw out my view of it. What I'm seeing is the Jews, the state of Israel, has officially elected another Messiah. And by doing that, that threatens to discredit or undermine. They're offering another answer as Messiah for the one that has been preached as God's answer, the one God validated, right? So now there's a conflict there. What do you mean another Messiah? You can't do that. See, that's what I keep seeing. As soon as they name another Messiah, something has to give. So that's what causes this war in heaven. And Michael and his angels fight against the dragon, who has set up his own Messiah. I got a Messiah, and your people are worshiping him. See? But he didn't prevail. See? Why? He's cast out, and all his angels with him, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the deliverance and the power and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Messiah have been accomplished. For the accuser of our brethren who accused them before God day and night is cast down, right? He's made his play. Here's his hand, right? Like in poker, you've been placing your bets and making your eyes and faking each other out and pulling your stuff. But when it's time to call, it's time to call. And that's what I'm starting to see here, Dad. This is that call moment when he's making his play. Look, they're going after a different Messiah. And now Michael and his angels make war with the devil on that and cast him down, because now there's only one Messiah, my friend. Up until now, you've been able to get away with your accusations. They don't like your Jesus, do they? They won't accept your Jesus, will they? How are you ever going to save them with your Messiah? They won't accept him. Look at what they do. See, accusing them night and day. But now that they've elected, now that the dragon's gotten them to elect another Messiah, however that's the right way to say it, spirit of Antichrist and this false Messiah. Now, wait a minute. Now there's war because, hey, no, there's only one Messiah. Can't have another Messiah. So now that's your play, and the devil's made his play, but he did not prevail. He got cast down. So, and now the loud voice from heaven declares, now the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have been accomplished. For the accuser of our brethren who have accused him day and night is cast down, and they've conquered him. They who? The brethren have conquered him who? The dragon, the accuser, by the blood of the Lamb. Not this other Messiah, not some other story, not some nothing else. They've conquered the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. what, again, like I said last week, I'm seeing this more and more, Dad. These brethren, these allusions to a temple, to a lamb, to they sang the song of Moses, right? I mean, why? What's all this got to do with Christianity? See, because this is the bride, this is the Jews, this is the word, this is the whole trip coming to the prophet, the Messiah that was going to save them and usher in them as the righteous rulers of the earth under their King of Kings and Lord of Lords, right? But they rejected their Messiah. They pierced their Messiah. So now there's this war over the Messiah, and now they've conquered the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not spare themselves even to death. See, and now this makes me reflect on John and his contemporaries and the first church and the whole thing that established this Messiah, this Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, is that these Jews said, hey, he's the Messiah that we've been waiting for. And that's the whole thing. God, that's on their heads. The Christians are simply the gift to the Gentile world, right? But these guys have been waiting for Messiah. They killed their prophets to not follow God, to be a whore instead, to follow every other nation. And so the devil's been able to accuse them day and night, the brethren of John, right? They killed your Messiah. They don't accept your Messiah. In fact, they've written that he's a bastard and a blasphemer, and that they were right in killing him. And now look at them. Look at them. They're scheming for a new Messiah. They're scheming for that land that you kicked them off of. They're going to set themselves up. They don't need you or your Messiah. Right? That's the accusations. But the minute there's another Messiah, now the hand has been played. And John's brethren, right? And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the deliverance and the power and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have been accomplished. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before God day and night, is cast down, our brethren. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not spare themselves even to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Right? So anyway, Dad, that was my little insight this week as I was rereading and trying to prepare to go forward. Was I didn't quite feel that I didn't quite see very clearly how this war in heaven. When can I justify war in heaven? If it didn't happen in the very beginning when Lucifer fell, what war are we talking about? So war over the Messiah, now that makes sense to me. Being cast down over this accusation, that makes sense to me. The brethren that have given themselves even to death for this testimony, saying this is our Messiah, they've triumphed over these accusations. Okay, so then we go back to last week's understanding. I think when the devil's cast to earth, he goes after this Israel, the woman, but not necessarily the state of Israel, but whatever God's going to establish in the end. God's Israel, this woman, the woman clothed with the sun, with the 12 stars, the patriarchs, not necessarily the state of Israel, although in some way they must coincide. But this may mean something more, broad than that in the type of worldwide persecution, perhaps. As I reread it, I saw that when you get to this final part, the dragon was enraged at the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her children, because she'd gotten. Remember, he spewed a river out of his mouth at some point to try and capture the woman. But God swallows the river up to spare her. And he's so enraged that he went to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. Now that sounds like Christians, if there's such a, if we're going to talk Christianity left in the world at this late date of the tribulation, then here's your Christians, I suppose, in the sense of the devil having the power to turn that wrath on anyone who claims the name of Jesus. Which Christians today, it's what they're looking for in an antichrist, right? They're looking, Dad, for some force like Obama or just some anti-Christian sentiment that Jesus isn't maybe what he claims to be. Maybe Jesus isn't the only way. Oh, well, yeah, that's true. It's the spirit of Antichrist. Anyone who denies Jesus as the Messiah, John said, is the Antichrist. So, but the reason I want to use this now is to start again in chapter 13, to try and move forward today, is because this beast, I've always been taught, and it's always been related to me through Christianity, that this beast equals the Antichrist. And in a sense that's true, but in a sense it's not true. This beast with the 7 heads was and is not in John's day. We're going to find out later in Revelation. This is not just a man in the end, or even a kingdom or a system trying to, get rid of Christians. That's not what the Antichrist is, and that's not what this beast is. That's, I think that's where the clarity needs to be. The light needs to be shined on that, and some clarity brought to that, because that's where I was always confused. And so the 13th chapter now, John says, and as I stood on the shore, on the sand of the shore, this is John standing. Remember, he's on Patmos, on the Isle of Patmos, so it's not a big stretch for John to be standing on the beach, right? And as I stood on the sand of the shore, I saw a wild beast rise up out of the sea. I don't want to waste too much time today, Dad, but I looked up all the words for beast in the lexicon, the lexiconic in that Blue Letter Bible program. And there's an Old Testament word and a couple of Greek words, zoon and therion. And they all seem to, at root, mean the same sort of thing, something alive, a living thing, something that's, has a pulse, is alive. Not even a pulse in the Old Testament word. It even meant vegetation, live stuff. And so the difference between therion and zoon seems to be fairly small. And when you read all the scriptures in which both words are used, it seems to be fairly benign, the difference. If anything, thera, the root word, comes for therion, that's used here, this word, chapter 13. I saw a therion rise out of the sea, a wild beast, a living one, an animal, something that was alive, not a statue, okay? It derives from the word theron, which is only used once in the whole scripture, where King David says that may their plans be a snare and a trap for them. Snare, thera, therion, sort of the live things that fall into this snare, animals and such. So, and it's used in here it's used as this beast that we've always thought of as this evil thing, is what I'm trying to get to. But it's used, therion is used in many other areas that have nothing to do with that. The snake that latched onto Paul's hand was a therion that got shooken off into the fire. It doesn't have anything to do with evil in the sense of the word that's used. This isn't a devil, this beast. This is just a therion. This is a vision of a wild animal. And that's what needs, I'm trying to get what I saw today and rereading it, Dad, and thinking about it this week. What is this beast that isn't a person, this Antichrist, that is both some system or spirit or empire or movement or force or rulership, that comes from the dragon? and yet what Christians have always thought of as a human impersonation, this Antichrist, this human being that's going to enter the world and, want to kill all Christians. And so I just want to let's keep our images straight in our head. So John's standing on the beach of the island where he's at, and he sees a wild animal come up. Now, the animals that were used earlier in Revelation around the throne, just to add a little spice to this, this understanding, are Zoan, not Therion. So there's something in the Therion that differentiates them from Zoan, in the sense that the animals, the living animals around the throne that looked like a calf and a man right, that had those faces in the first books of Revelation, the earlier part of Revelation, that's Zoan. This animal that rises up out of the sea that John sees, he uses the word Therion. So, but either way, neither of them connotates good or evil in the word themselves. But there is a different word chosen for this animal. But this is the thing when we're always talking about this, he will cause and the world will worship, and we're talking about this Therion that John's seeing. That's not a man. He's not talking about a man. He's not seeing a particular man that has this power, is making this war, is being worshipped. He's talking about this image that he's seeing. So that's what I've been trying. What does that image? What are we to get of that? What is this image that John's seeing? So it has these 7 heads and 10 horns, and that animal I saw was like a leopard. I mean, this is it ties it into Daniel so clearly, as we talked about last week. One of these heads looks mortally wounded. Later, the word sword he's going to use, or that's what's going to be used in my translation here, and I think in all translations I've ever read, this head that had looked like it had been wounded by the sword. Here it says mortally wounded, but in the King James it says wounded unto death. So, in some people through Christianity have taught that that's some sort of personage that will come back. John F. Kennedy will come back to life, that kind of thing. And while that fits a very sort of shallow, small view of the prophecy, right? I mean, to just look at it that way, it says, oh, maybe that's what, wounded to death and all the world will wonder. But it says they wonder after this beast, this Therion, not some man that they see, that they perceive as a man talking to them. They wonder after this, whatever this Therion turns out to be in our world that we're watching for, or that we're anticipating. This beast is going to manifest as something. The crown on the head of a horn is just one way. And I've been seeing that, Dad, as relating to Daniel's 10-toed kingdom, because later when this beast comes up in Revelation, it's going to talk about these 10 kings being of one mind and given their power by the dragon for an hour with the beast. See, again, with this Therion, these 10 kings. They're the ones with the crowns. They're the human beings that we're seeing. The beast isn't a human being, or whatever representation of the beast is in a crown. It isn't that people are worshiping. It isn't that that's making war. It isn't that that's got this power. Okay, so let's read through Revelation 13 again and try and push forward. But I just want to have that little picture of it now. I saw a wild beast rise up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads blasphemous words. And the wild beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his throne, and great authority. And one of his heads was as though mortally wounded, but his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered about the wild beast. This animal that looks like a... See, we're not seeing a leopard with bare feet with the mouth of a lion with 7 heads, are we? Is that what we're wondering about? That's what rolls onto the scene? A 7-headed leopard? I don't think so. Remember, this is this vision world that John's seeing. So that's not what we're seeing. But the world wonders after, and all the world wondered about the wild beast. Okay, let's just leave that for a moment. And they worshipped the dragon. Who's they? Sounds like all the world, doesn't it? One of his heads was though mortally wounded, but his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered about the wild beast. And they worshipped the dragon because he had given power to the wild beast, saying, who can prevail against him to fight him? Who's saying this? All the world. Right? Stick with me. And there was given to him a mouth. Given to who? A mouth. This Antichrist? This person? No. Given to this wild 7-headed leopard. There was given to him a mouth, that he might utter boastful things and blasphemies. Now, the boastful things and blasphemies will come through the mouth of a human being, I have no doubt, that we will see. Some king, probably, some ruler, some authority. But John's vision is of the beast itself receiving a mouth to say these things. And power was given to him, not the mouth, the beast. Who can prevail against him to fight him? And there was given to him a mouth, that he might utter boastful things. And power was given to him to make war for 3.5 years, 40 and 2 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling place and those who dwell in heaven. See, the beast is doing this. Right? Look at my false Messiah. Look at my Messiah. Here's the Messiah. Now we have a Messiah. And power was given to him over every tribe and kindred and tongue and nation, and it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And all who dwell upon the earth shall worship him, even those whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. All who dwell upon the earth shall worship him. All who dwell upon the earth shall worship him. See, not a man, this wild animal, this leopard, this 7-headed leopard. See, that's what this is about. All the people on the earth shall worship him. See, what's he saying? What's this? Who is this? This isn't the king of Jordan or the Hashemite king or anything like that. This is this 7-headed leopard with one head that looks like it was killed and brought back to life, and the whole world's going to look. They're going to wonder about this 7-headed leopard, whatever that is. Worship the dragon. See, not bow over and bow their heads to the floor. We worship you, Satan. That's not what that means. Worship the dragon. This is from John's perspective. They'll be worshiping the dragon, just like in the Old Testament, how the prophets would say people worship demons not knowing, right? Worship idols and even worship spirits of demons not realizing what they're worshiping, right? what they're giving value to. Worship, worthship. They'll worship the dragon because he'd given power to the wild beast. Saying who can see what we're saying, what the world is saying is, wow, who can fight against this? So we're worshiping the power behind that entity. Wow, who can fight against this thing? See, I see it as this sort of new world order concept coming about, this, to be more specific from our perspective, Dad, this unified religious thing, right? All the monotheistic religions holding hands and changing the times and seasons. No more Christmas this, no more Hanukkah that. We're all going to worship this image here now as the one spirit, the true, life force or whatever, right? Now, the trouble with that for me, Dad, is that this Muslim empire, this rise of this Muslim king, this is what seems to be the type of power in our world right now that could satisfy this. Not some rise of a new age concept, but the rise of, let's just say the Caliph, let's not say the Mahdi at this point, but in their world, they're waiting for a Mahdi like the Christians are waiting for their Messiah to return. So in this climate of anticipation, a caliphate truly forms. Not this ISIS false flag mercenary army called a caliphate, but an actual caliphate. The member states start joining, right? The tribes of people start signing up. We want to be under this ruler. We want to be under this ruler. And that grows and grows and grows, right? This, as we talked about, the first seal and the white horse, and a crown's given to him. And this is the way I'm imagining that's what the event we're going to see is going to be this rise of the good caliph, and all of the peoples giving their pledging themselves to that authority. And now if you imagine that becoming tens of millions, as I was saying last week, or perhaps more, but let's just say tens of millions of Sunni Islamic men now join this good caliph. And for a while, because it's a good caliph and moderate, and everything they're saying is so positive and wonderful, and they're making, this guy's out destroying the bad guys that want to keep people from living a copacetic life together, because, of course, the one that we're projecting could be this caliph, the Hashemite king of Jordan, is the one that has the say over the Temple Mount, and he's the one that's been advocating that all religions should get along. He's the one that's visited the Pope, and right? He's the one that's friends with Israel. His father and their kingdom was the first ones to make friends, give back the land, and get their land back or whatever. And so this image now in my mind of a world that's going to suddenly find itself worshiping this new power. We know it's a new power because Babylon has fallen. We're coming to all that we anticipate now in Revelation. So I want to draw from what we know is coming. But we know that, the merchants of the world, all the people that have gotten rich, right, are going to stand far off and say, oh my gosh, how can this be in one day? Now, we've talked about that, Dad. What else could that really be? What qualifies, if that scripture's accurate, except a collapse of the dollar system? Now, trading stops. Bada bing, bada bang. Yesterday you had a credit card. Today there's no such thing. Yesterday you were on a system, your business, your the resources of your country or whatever was all on a system that no longer is functioning. You talk about chaos, right? Utter chaos. What replaces it if it just were to crash? So, which is why it can't do that unless it, I think, except that it's sort of a planned catastrophe, because otherwise it's such a catastrophe that you'd never allow it. The people that, like, as you've always said, Dad, it's not in their best interest to scare people into the point, of being slaves living in cages and all this Orwellian kind of thing that the alternative media has been using to scare people for years. You've always been saying it doesn't make sense that they would let the world go that far over the cliff, because then they lose all their investment, when all they have to do is mete it out as needed to keep everything afloat. And as you said, how many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, that's what they've been doing. And so I say, though, that if it's part of their plan, getting to this idea of 3 planned world wars, and that they are going to pull the plug on a world war. And then what was I reading as I read ahead in Revelation? That, the spirit of these frogs, right? Remember, come out of the mouth of the false prophet and the Antichrist, and they go out, and the dragon, and they go out and draw all the kings of the world to this battle, to be part of this battle. I mean, isn't that just sort of a funky symbolic way of presenting what's been predicted as bringing the whole world into a conflagration? So all of that sort of fits, see? And so I've been trying to back engineer it to see, who could qualify for this, Dad? How could we get to a point where the dragons worship, where the whole world and all who dwell upon the earth shall worship him, even those whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb? So if you're not part of that book that was already chosen out of it, this is why that book was written. This is why the Lamb had to choose and call out and, justify and sanctify his chosen ones. Because otherwise all the world, all who dwell on the earth shall worship him, just like they did before the flood, right? If it wasn't for God choosing Noah and his family. So, I mean, come on. See, this is the only sort of context that makes sense, that fits the whole scripture. And so all that dwell on the earth are going to worship this animal. So this animal, has to be some alternative to God, to the Jewish system, right? Since that's the system that all the earth is destined to worship someday when Jesus returns, right? And all the nations will come and be blessed by Jerusalem and by the Jews, right? So what's really going on, getting back to where I started today, Dad, with this war in heaven, but that the devil's got to make his own system if he's got any chance at this. God sent his son as Messiah, but the devil got that stomped out. He was going at, the woman who bare the man-child, the dragon went after that man-child. Get rid of that Messiah. But God caught him up to heaven. He couldn't, right? The dragon couldn't destroy the Son of Man. So he goes after the house of Israel, because now if he can destroy the house of Israel, well, then there's no, what's the Son of Man going to come back to rule, right? So that's the dragon's other option. Okay, couldn't get the son, let me get the house of Israel. And so that's what now leads to this modern day when those who claim to be Jews but are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. These are the people that are in charge of the state of Israel. And they're going after their own Messiah. They got their own ideas about Messiah and what Messiah can do and should do, and right? All this is going to help them expand their Greater Israel project, like we talked about in the Sunday show. From the Euphrates to the Nile, that's all going to be Israel. The state of Israel is going to occupy that land someday, is their vision, and that's the vision of the false Messiah, not God. God's vision is that Jerusalem, the holy mountain, his holy city, the original territory that he gave to his tribes, which did not include all of that land. That's what is going to be a blessing to the world. But see, under the false Messiah, under the dragon's plan, we got a different Messiah who rules the world from all of that land, and we destroy any remnant of that woman clothed with the sun. See? And then, well, okay, God can be God, but he's got no part in my world anymore if I'm the dragon, right? He can't win. He wasn't right. See? That can be the only, deeper context under which this is all playing out. So, for the whole world to worship the dragon, for me, means, okay, his false Messiah must be winning. That must be who we're talking about here. And that false Messiah has got to rise up as this caliphate of the Muslims. I mean, that provides the way for this unity of the religions. That provides for these great and boastful things, or these great things that, from what Daniel's picture of this little horn with the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. The great things are, I'm the caliph of the Muslims, and I'm saying we're all the same. We all worship the same God. Jesus is my brother too. The Jews are my brothers too. We're all going to share the mount. We're all going to worship God together. And the world loves that. See, and it's not until the 3.5-year point to try and put some sort of, some dynamic on it that fits with the scripture here. The change happens. The temple's been built, all these wonderful words for 3.5 years. While the two witnesses, as I really appreciate Brother Dave last week made a comment, or on last week's show, about the two witnesses, being during the first 3.5 years, which I couldn't conceive that because of the plagues and such, and the fact that they're killed and lie in the streets for 3.5 days, and then the world sends gifts. But how can that be at the very end? How can that be after all these plagues and all these earthquakes and the people hiding in the rocks praying for him to fall on them? How can they be sending gifts to each other? That can't be. It can't be. So I think Brother Dave is correct. And my own vision of it now is that the two witnesses must be during the first 3.5 years. They're the ones that are going to come out of this, whatever this warning, this Jonah warning after 40 days of people seeing dead rise in Jerusalem. There'll be two witnesses left out of that will be the ones that don't let that story drop. Yes, Jesus is the Messiah. You brethren of ours, you Jews, are doing the wrong thing. You're following the wrong path. You're, this Talmudic thing looking for a different Messiah is going to lead to God's wrath. And we're going to do everything we can to disrupt it. And because this false Messiah comes out with this righteous ruler, right? This white horse warrior, given a crown to go conquering. See, the world's got to love this person. I mean, it's the only way I can see that. How else do we get to, and all who dwell on the earth shall worship him? How do we get there? So this white horse ruler has to be built up for that first 3.5 years into something that while the two witnesses perhaps are the only force in the world speaking against them. And the group that is with them, which would be these Jews that are believing Jesus is the Messiah, right? That's why they get 3.5 years. And then the second 3.5 years, they get until the mark of the beast. And then from then, they got to give their heads. Now there's no more, now it's too late now, whatever that means, as far as reconciliation with the Messiah. So, I can only imagine that this can come in our world and what we're watching in this rise of a caliph, this complete sort of solidarity of a Sunni Muslim nation that gets so big and so powerful that they're able to perhaps even threaten the Shia nation and bring them into submission. Although I still think that's got to be the king of the East that fights him at the end. So it's this Sunni nation that the world is wondering at, this caliphate that was dead and is alive again, this Muslim, this single Muslim people, this ummah, that now who can make war with them? And because of their power, they're able to, I don't know if it shut down the oil. I mean, that's what obviously causes it, in my view, Dad. That's what seems to be the cause of the financial collapse, this Babylon falling, is that they just, they shut off the oil spigot. Bam, oil's no longer traded in dollars. And that's also what brings on the Third World War. So how all those things play out, I'm not sure. I'm trying right now, I'm wandering down this path of trying to find circumstances in the world that fit what the prophecies of Revelation predict, right? So without just trying to identify this beast by some historical evidence or something else, I'm saying it's going to result in the whole world worshiping the dragon, because the dragon gave power to this animal with the 7 heads who the whole world wonders about and says, who can fight with him? Right? That's kind of like what, if we were going to look at this as having happened already in time, that's what happened with America, isn't it? America was that sudden entity, this beast that rises onto the scene of the world, and the whole world wonders after this America, this beast. Wow, look at that place with its open borders and its, right? And the next thing you know, who can make war with them? I mean, that's my historical perspective. That's the way it's happened in history. So doesn't it have to be something like that? Isn't that what this is describing? So anyway, I can only see that in our world, what could that be? The Chinese? I mean, I don't know. I think what we're looking at is a Muslim caliph and the rise of that. Who can make war with them? And that's the one that Jews are going to call their Messiah because of the deal that's been made between them. And probably they're both lying to each other. They think they're, like Daniel talks about, the kings sitting at a table lying to each other. That may have been in the ancient past, and it's probably always in the ever present. These kings sitting at tables lying to another, because we know that it does result in both their destruction. It does result in the Jews being destroyed, even though they're going to get their temple rebuilt. If you're a Christian, you got to believe that they choose a false Messiah, because they don't choose Jesus, and yet they are going to choose a Messiah in the end. The people of the prince that come result in the city and sanctuary being destroyed. So anyway, I'm still going to say that this wild beast, this last head, that feet kingdom, like you've always taught, Dad, has to be the Muslim empire. And the 10-toed outgrowth, the 10 horns with the 10 crowns, have to be Muslim kings that satisfy this prophecy. Okay, let's see if I can push forward a little bit today, Dad. Because now that's the end of that vision of that beast. All who dwell on the earth shall worship him, even those whose names are not written. Even those whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man has ears, let him hear. Right? Because we're talking all the world is going to worship this thing. John's vision. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. I don't fully understand what he's saying there. I feel like it must have a colloquial meaning. Patience and the faith of the saints seems to refer to the fact that the patience to be able to see through all this stuff, since all the world's going to worship this beast, even those whose names aren't written in this book. So doesn't matter who else you are, you're going to worship this beast. You're going to fall for this one. Verse 11 starts chapter 13 of Revelation, and I beheld another wild beast come up out of the earth. Out of the earth. First one came up out of the sea. And I beheld another wild beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. And he spoke as a dragon. And all the power of the first wild beast before him was exercised by him, and he caused the earth and those who dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he performed great wonders, to such an extent that he could even make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, beguiling those who dwell on the earth, to make an image to the wild beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So, picture this now. Now, another wild animal. See, is this the person? Are we going to see something with horns like a lamb? No. This is from the side of heaven looking at it. We're going to see something. What is this beast with horns like a lamb and the mouth of a dragon? And he spoke as a dragon. Again, I keep bringing this back to what's this story all about? Messiah, false Messiah, right? That's what's going on here. That's what all this is about. The Messiah has come. Our brethren who have been hanging on even to death have overcome this dragon who gets cast down with his devils, with his angels, actually, by Michael and his group after a war. A war of what? Well, it seems to be the Messiah is what's at stake here. And so I'm thinking that this is someone that's promoting the false Messiah as the Messiah. That's what this is. That this beast that comes up out of the land is talking about. The power of the first wild beast was exercised by him. Now remember, the power of the first wild beast is who can make war with him, right? Who's able to fight against him, right? We're not seeing the dragon. We're seeing this, whatever the representation of this 7-headed leopard, barefooted, lion-mouthed wild animal is on the earth. The one that the people are wondering about, like America in its day. Wow, look at this America thing. Look at what a strange beast that is. All these people coming from all over the world. And wow, look at how powerful they've become. Who can make war with them? They're a superpower. So something like that. And this wild beast is exercising that power, meaning he's using those weapons on behalf of that animal. And he caused the earth and those who dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. He caused the earth to worship. Again, does that mean falling down on our face? I don't think so. I think it means he caused he's the one that's helping the earth see this is the answer. Here's the good guy. Here's what's, you know what I mean? This isn't going to be some devils. And he performed great wonders to such an extent that he could even make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, beguiling those who dwell on earth to make an image to the wild beast. Not forcing them, not twisting their arm, not holding a gun to their head. You will make an image of the wild beast or I will kill you. No, that comes later. You will take the mark or we will kill you. But right now, we're in beguiling, is the way my translation has it. Beguiling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the wild beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. Right? So, calling fire down from heaven, exercising that power on behalf of, hey, this is the way we have to go. This is the guy we got to follow. Here's the system. Here's the, kingdom may not be the right word, is why I keep trying to not use that word. But it's going to be something for sure that is broad enough, a broad enough system, a kingdom. That's why I see it as perhaps the caliphate. This is what we got to get behind, right? It makes sense to me in the way we've been looking at what we've been anticipating for so many years. And so if that were to happen, this caliph rise up, this good caliph that everybody loves or that has a righteous angle, and all these people are giving him their allegiance and their, desiring him to lead. It's not quite a state or an empire, but it's something. It's on the verge of becoming again a Muslim empire. And so whoever this other beast is being represented by in the world, is that a pope? Is that a Islamic cleric? Is that United Nations? Because I'm sorry, United Nations also qualifies as having horns like a lamb, but the speaking like a dragon. And it could be them that's exercising the power on behalf of this first beast. It could be them that causes the world or beguiles the world. Let's build an image of these guys, and then eventually institutes the plan for marking people so that we can all be safe and secure and buy and sell, and then enforcing that you'll be killed if you don't do this because the world is at stake. We can't let you destroy us, so we have to kill you. I mean, think of it. It's not going to be some devil sitting on a throne saying, take this mark or we kill you. I don't think. So anyway, the more I reflect on it, the more I think that this second beast that comes out of the earth is probably like the United Nations, not like the Catholic Church. Verse 15, and he had power to give life to the image of the wild beast. This is this other beast. United Nations, Catholic Church, whatever we're talking about here. He had power to give life to the image of the wild beast and to cause all those who would not worship the image of the wild beast to be killed. Okay? Who would not worship the image of the wild beast. And these aren't happening, in my view, Dad, this is taking up this whole 3.5 year, if not 7 year period. It's not happening one day to the next. First day he beguiles those who dwell on the earth to build an image. Next day he gives power to it and causes everybody to be killed if they won't worship the image. And it says, and cause all those who would not worship the image to be killed. Right? That's not like an offer, worship the image or we'll kill you, in the sense of a personal offer. Again, getting back to this vision of some entity like the United Nations. It's making a policy, right? It's just making a policy. But, of course, it's hard to see a United Nations policy that says worship the image of this kingdom or whatever, or be killed, right? It's much easier to see some sort of cleric saying that, in my view. So I really, I don't know, Dad. I think more important is understanding the context of what this is all taking place in. This image and this beast and this antichrist and this, what they call the false prophet, which I don't see any words called false prophet here. I see a living thing that comes up out of the earth with two horns, speaking like a dragon, and has this power, the power that the people of the earth are saying, who can go to war with this? Right? So it's a military power that we're talking about here, is why I keep coming back to. It's not a religious power. Nobody's, the power exercised by the first beast is not some religious power that the world's going, oh, look at how right this is. Right? Who can fight with him? So all the power of the beast before him, which sounds to me like a military power, caused the earth and those that dwell in to worship the first beast and perform great wonders to such an extent that he could even make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Is that religious fire or some other kind of fire? I don't know, Dad. I tell you, it's, I'm just, all of the traditional images now, I'm just starting to, they're threatened by the fact that I'm trying to really see a reality that's getting close, right? We really have a world coming to us soon when this beast, whatever it is going to be here. The spirit of Antichrist is already at work for all these years. We're coming to the time of the end where the wars and rumors of wars, right? The setup is so clear to me. The seeds that are being planted now for this final world war and the way the characters are taking their roles in all this seems pretty clear. And so, like I say, trying to back engineer it from there, I'm looking at, well, who could these players be? This 7-headed leopard, who could it be? How many things could result in the world worshiping it and not finding a way to make war with it? How many things could result in the financial crash of the world in a day, right? How many things could result in the world, Damascus being destroyed in a day and being uninhabitable, right? That's not really been a historical possibility until the modern era, and then it hasn't been a realistic possibility until, the last couple of years. All of a sudden now, geez, wait a minute. They really are setting up the Russian military base over there. You got Turkey, Israel's bombing them, right? You've got real potential now for that prophecy to come true. And we can see how it could come true. Russian and American bombs, for the most part, Israeli-made bombs falling on people there for whatever reason now. And we're seeing the reasons in our modern day. It's a struggle for this territory and the rule of this territory. Are the Shia going to rule it? Are the Sunnis going to rule it? Is Israel going to rule it? Are the Turks going to rule it? Who's going to rule this territory in the future? And it's that fight that I'm saying perhaps has been stimulated over all, the last 100 years on purpose, funding the various factions, the divide and conquer mentality that's been in place for thousands of years for the small group of people that rule. To know that the only way for a small group to defeat a very large group is to divide and conquer them. How do you do that? Well, here you go. Shias, Sunnis, Muslims, Jews, Turks, atheists, Christians, all funded to fight each other for their territory until that can be built into some, like building the pot in poker, right? You start with throwing just a few, you ante up, and you start with just checking the bet and throwing in a couple of dollars. But when 2 or 3 people in the circle think they've got the winning hand, when you've got 3 of a kinds and full houses and straight flushes and such, somebody's sitting there with a straight flush, they're never giving up, are they? And so you keep building up that pot. You keep, no matter what someone throws in, I'll bet the house, I'll bet my house too. And so I think that that's how we get to Armageddon. And to do that, you need to have some sort of system in place that isn't common sense, that's for sure. People with your average person doesn't do that. You can't be, you're going to see through it too quick. That's why I think you've needed all these decades building up political systems based on money and lobbying, right? Based on confrontation being constantly stimulated, fomented, and inciting problems and providing the solutions that you desire to keep getting the game changed from one in which people naturally have social nets and have reasonable laws and have, that keep things like banks in check and keep corporations from stealing all their resources, as they did 100 years ago when they threw the Federal Reserve, before it was called that, when these bankers were trying to get in to America. The American congressmen could see through their scheme. And even though they were being offered, obviously paid off, some of them that were altruistic in their desire, I guess, still to do the right thing, or just didn't want those people, man. They just could see the complete sellout. Hey, man, whether I want to be altruistic or not, I don't want my country run by you guys. I'm going to sell out my country forever to you guys. And I mean, they wrote about that. They knew that's what was going on. How many 80-something countries throughout the Illuminati, and how many throughout the bankers? Why? Because they saw who these people were and what what they were determined to do. And so now I come forward into the modern world and I can see, okay, these guys, they're the ones pulling the strings. They're the ones giving everybody the guns. And they're the ones with some sort of plan, according to, Professor Quigley, even as early as 1966, or as close to us, 50 years ago. He had a history and professor and a historian and professor of political science telling the world that there was this group that had the power to run the world and infiltrated every system. So I'm just saying it's the only way, Dad, I can see that you can get the systems to keep putting the money in, even though their hand may not be, even though you're not holding a royal flush, you're still betting the house. You're still betting everything. And that's what is coming. And that's, it's the only thing that fits the prophecies. And so how do we get here from there through the prophecy now in Revelation? Is through this 7-year covenant, through this rise of a false deliverer. 2 witnesses apparently will be warning, I imagine, for the first 3.5 years. then you're going to have what Jesus told the Jews in Matthew. You'll be handed over to be persecuted for my name's sake. And I think that's where we're starting to get to in our, I mean, we're getting close in the world, but now in our, what we're reading here in Revelation, this wild beast that's going to be calling fire down from heaven in the sight of men and causing everybody, using the power of the first one, right? This is all getting to that time now when it's not going to be legal to keep saying Jesus. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the only God, right? That is going to become illegal in the world. And so this is what I think we're seeing here. Everybody's always known that. What I'm trying to, I guess, the little bit of insight I'm trying to add to it this week, Dad, is, which I know you and I talk about it a lot, but for a lot of people that might listen, the he and the him referred to in here are these beasts, not the actual people. The human beings may be performing things, of course, that allow all these, the stuff this beast is being said to be done, will be done through people. But it won't be people that look like a beast, is I guess what I'm trying to say. This second one has horns of a lamb. United Nations, Catholic Church, the Benevolent Society, that's who's going to be causing all this, not evil characters. The whole world is going to be deceived. Unless your name's been written from the foundation of the world, you're going to wonder after this nation. You're going to wonder who can beat them. You're going to fall into worshiping this. I mean, that's what's so heavy, Dad, and what makes me wonder, how close is this? How many more years of development do we really have to go to get to this type of world? But terrorism's already, look at when I've been reading through the articles for preparing for Sunday a little bit, and boy, oh boy, terrorism, the threat of terrorism, and the stuff we're willing to do, the laws we're willing to make. So yeah, at some point in the name of protecting the world, they're going to have to kill anyone that won't go along with that protection, right? So how far away is that? I'm not sure. But this two-horned, this lamb-horned, dragon-mouthed beast who first exercises the power of the seven-headed beast, which I say is a military power, to cause those who dwell on the earth to worship this seven-headed beast. Then he performs great signs and wonders, making fire come down, beguiling. So it starts with using the military power to get the world to worship this entity, this beast. Then he beguiles the world through wonders to get them to build an image, and then he causes them, threatens them. Compelled all, small and great, rich and poor, free men and slaves, to receive a mark in their right hand or on their brows. This is after he had the power to give life to the image of the wild beast and cause all those who would not worship the image of the wild beast to be killed. And he compelled all, small and great, rich and poor, free men and slaves, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their brows, so that no man might buy or sell, unless he who had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the code number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding decipher the code number of the beast, for it is the code number of the name of a man, and his number is 666. And as I said, Dad, this Bible even says the number represents the Aramaic letters which spell Nero Caesar. But sorry, it couldn't have ended Nero Caesar, so I'm thinking that means something else. And that putting flesh and blood on the idea of this mark, as we've talked about before, charagma is what it is. It's a sign of alignment of forces and principles. It's what the allegiance, if you will. It's what the Roman soldiers used to get, charagma, to dedicate themselves to the cause, right? So it's that sign of alignment, right? More to me than this willingness to worship the devil or something, the way Christianity's always had me imagine it in my life. It's the fact that this is being offered as the only solution, and your willingness to go along with that solution. Because part of that solution, of course, is Jesus is not God, right? You can't incite people with that kind of talk anymore. Jesus can't be the Messiah. There's only one God, this image that we've brought to life. That's God. And this is his mark. And only with that mark do you survive. So you got to be willing to, to take that mark to survive and go with their system. That's what it is, this mark of the beast. It's not bow to the devil and get marked for the devil. That's not what's going on there. Although I have to think that because of all the warnings, because what we're going to find very soon, Dad, next week in Revelation, I hope, is that, for those that take the mark, how bad it is, the woes, right? Well, okay, you take that mark. It's like too late for you now. You've passed a line. So obviously, by the time that mark comes, there must be a justification for that sort of, ultimatum. That's, and I think that's what's I've never seen clearly explored in Revelation and in Christianity. What's gone on between that first part of the 3.5 years where people are sending gifts to each other, and this time when the second beast with the horns is given life to this image and causing everyone to worship it or die. Take this marker, you don't survive. We'll kill you, because we can't have anybody that isn't marked, in the world anymore. It's not safe, or whatever that excuse will be. What could transpire is the thing that I'm still hoping we get a little more insight in as we read through Revelation. And I think we will. Actually, we're going to see the 7 last plagues come up, and so we're going to get a feeling for some of the things that these people perhaps have been experiencing before this mark, and now the things that's going to come after this mark. These plagues, as I'm saying, that come after this mark. But obviously there's something that's gone on between the end of the first 3.5 years and this marking, because God is praised as so righteous and his judgments are so righteous, the stuff he brings out against the people that are marked, right? So anyway, I guess I'm rambling now because I'm anxious to keep moving on. But anyway, thanks for being here today, and I hope that the 13th chapter, the woman with the sun and the 2 beasts that rise out of the sea and the land, I hope we're just getting a little more of a visceral feeling of those, if nothing more right now. Just something to break the traditional view of, Jesus opening seals, killing all the non-believers, devils running the world, and all these non-believers, they deserve to be killed because, they're taking the mark of these devils willingly. And that doesn't seem to be what it really says. And I don't think that's really how it's going down. So anyway, thanks, Dad, for having me on the show, and keep loving your neighbor, everybody. God bless. Talk to you next week.